Mafia boss's daughter would only speak to the maid. What she finally said shattered the family. Why did the young girl refuse to speak to anyone except the maid? What truth had she been holding inside that could tear the family apart? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mercy Behind the Throne, where silence, trust, and painful revelations can change a household forever. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another emotional story. Thank you for every view, thoughtful comment, and moment you spend watching with us. Your continued support helps this community grow stronger each day. Tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time it is there right now. We always enjoy hearing from viewers across different countries and cities. Now, settle in, open your heart, and let us step into the beginning of today's powerful story. He thought his daughter had forgotten how to speak, but she had only been waiting for the one person in that marble house who would believe her. The Moretti mansion glittered that night like a palace built to hide sorrow. Crystal lights burned above the grand hall, polished floors reflected women in satin dresses and men in black suits, and outside the tall windows, the Chicago skyline shimmered in the cold evening air. Vincent Moretti stood at the center of it all, calm, handsome, untouchable, a white mafia boss whose name could make powerful men lower their voices. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. His engagement to Claire Whitmore had drawn judges, businessmen, family allies, and half the city's most dangerous smiles into one room. But on the wide staircase above them sat Lily Moretti, his 7-year-old daughter, silent as a porcelain doll in a white dress she had not chosen. 8 months had passed since her mother died in what the family called a tragic accident, and since that night, Lily had not spoken a single word. Doctors had examined her. Specialists had studied her. Tutors had tried picture cards, music, rewards, patience, and pressure. Vincent had spent more money than most families would see in a lifetime, but his daughter remained locked behind her own eyes, watching the world as if every adult in it had failed her. Grace Walker noticed what everyone else ignored. She was only the new maid, a black woman in a plain black uniform, standing near the champagne table with a silver tray balanced in steady hands. To the guests, she was part of the furniture, just another quiet worker moving through wealth that did not belong to her. But Grace had learned long ago that silence had a shape. It could be fear. It could be grief. It could be a child holding something too heavy for her small body to carry. From across the room, Grace watched Claire glide toward the staircase, her diamond bracelet flashing under the lights. Claire smiled beautifully, the kind of smile that made guests sigh and photographers lift their cameras. She looked like the perfect future wife, graceful, polished, sweet enough to fool a room full of strangers. She climbed 2 steps and opened her arms to Lily. "Come here, sweetheart," she said softly, but Lily's face changed. It was small, almost invisible, a tightening around the mouth, a tremble in her fingers, the sudden whiteness of knuckles gripping the stair rail. The guests kept talking. Vincent turned to accept a handshake. No one saw Lily shrink back except Grace. Then Claire leaned in and kissed the child's forehead for the room to admire. Lily flinched as if the kiss had carried a memory. Grace stepped forward before she could stop herself. The tray in her hands rattled once, just enough for Vincent's eyes to flick toward her. Lily looked past Claire, past the diamonds, past the crowd, and found Grace. Then the impossible happened. The child who had not spoken for 8 months reached down, caught the edge of Grace's white apron, and whispered in a voice thin enough to break the heart, "Don't let her take me upstairs." Grace froze. Vincent heard it. Claire heard it. And for one breath, beneath all that crystal and candlelight, the entire Moretti family stopped pretending. 3 weeks earlier, Grace Walker had arrived at the Moretti estate with 1 suitcase, $42 in her checking account, and a promise she had made to her mother in a hospital room on the south side. The mansion sat behind iron gates at the end of a private road, 12,000 square feet of pale stone, black windows, trimmed hedges, and silence so perfect it felt expensive. Grace had cleaned penthouses before, hotel suites, lawyers' offices, houses where people left half-eaten dinners on plates that cost more than her weekly groceries, but nothing had prepared her for the Moretti home. It did not feel lived in. It felt preserved, as if grief had walked through every room and ordered everyone not to touch anything. Mrs. Alvarez, the head housekeeper, met her at the service entrance with a clipboard tucked under one arm and tired eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. She looked Grace over, not cruelly, but carefully, the way people did when hiring someone into a house where mistakes had consequences. "You will work quietly," she said. "You will keep your phone in your locker. You will not repeat anything you hear." Grace nodded. She needed the job too badly to question the rules. Her mother's treatments were not waiting for pride. Then Mrs. Alvarez lowered her voice as they walked past the kitchen, past two men in dark suits near the back hall, and toward the staff quarters. "There are 3 things you must understand. First, you do not ask about Mrs. Moretti. Second, you do not go to the 3rd floor unless assigned. Third, you do not speak to Miss Lily unless she speaks first." Grace slowed at the child's name. "Miss Lily?" "Mr. Moretti's daughter," Mrs. Alvarez said, and something in her face softened for half a second before it disappeared. 7 years old. She has not spoken since her mother passed. Doctors come. Teachers come. They all leave. Grace looked toward the grand staircase visible through the open hall. At the very top, almost hidden by the shadow of the railing, stood a little girl in a pale blue nightgown. Her hair fell around her face, and in one hand she held a stuffed rabbit by one ear. She was not crying. That was what unsettled Grace most. Children cried when they wanted comfort. This child only watched, still as a photograph, as if she had learned that asking for help was useless. Vincent Moretti appeared below the staircase a moment later, dressed in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, his expression controlled and unreadable. Every person nearby seemed to adjust themselves around him, shoulders straightening, voices dropping, air tightening. He looked up at Lily, and for one brief second, the powerful mask cracked. A father stood there, not a boss, not a name whispered across Chicago, just a man staring at a child he could not reach. Lily turned away from him and vanished down the upper hallway. Vincent remained still, his hand resting on the banister, his jaw tight with a pain no one dared mention. Mrs. Alvarez touched Grace lightly on the elbow and guided her forward. "Remember what I said. In this house, silence is safer." Grace followed, but her eyes stayed on the empty landing. She had heard that warning before in other homes, from other frightened mouths, and she knew what adults often meant when they said silence was safer. They meant the truth was dangerous. By the end of her first week, Grace understood that the Moretti mansion was not quiet because it was peaceful. It was quiet because everyone inside it had learned where not to step, what not to say, and which doors to pass without looking. Breakfast was served at 7:30 every morning in a room large enough for 30 people, but only 3 chairs were ever used. Vincent sat at the head of the table with black coffee cooling beside untouched toast, reading messages on a phone that never seemed to stop lighting up. Claire Whitmore sat to his right, elegant in cream-colored sweaters, pearl earrings, and soft perfume that filled the room before she did. Lily sat several feet away in a booster chair she was too old for, her small hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the white plate in front of her. No one asked what she wanted. Her oatmeal arrived plain because Claire said sugar made children difficult. Her juice arrived watered down because Claire said too much sweetness made them spoiled. Vincent heard these things, but his mind was always divided between the daughter he loved and the empire that demanded him. Grace noticed the way Lily never reached for anything until Claire looked away. She noticed how the little girl kept her stuffed rabbit pressed against her ribs under the table, hidden beneath the napkin. She noticed how Vincent softened whenever he looked at Lily, but never seemed to know how to cross the 5 feet between them. One morning, Claire leaned close to the child and said, "Your father has a very important meeting today, sweetheart, so let us not make him worry." Lily's spoon slipped from her fingers and clattered against the bowl. The sound was small, but the room reacted as if glass had shattered. Claire closed her eyes and sighed with practiced patience. Vincent looked up. Grace froze near the sideboard with the coffee pot in her hand. Lily stared at the fallen spoon, her lower lip trembling, but no sound came out. Claire smiled for Vincent, then reached over and smoothed Lily's hair with a touch that made the child go rigid. "It is all right," Claire said gently. "Accidents happen when little girls refuse to pay attention." Grace felt something tighten in her chest. It was not the words alone. It was the way Lily disappeared inside herself when Claire spoke them. Later that afternoon, while polishing the hallway outside the music room, Grace saw Lily standing at the foot of the grand staircase. The child was looking up toward the third floor, one hand wrapped around the banister, her face pale in the afternoon light. At the top of the stairs, Claire's silver bracelet flashed as she crossed the landing. Lily stepped backward so quickly her heel caught the edge of the rug. Grace moved without thinking, catching the child gently by the shoulder before she could fall. Lily looked up at her, wide-eyed, breath caught in her throat. Grace did not ask what was wrong. She only lowered herself until they were eye to eye and whispered, "You are safe right now." Lily did not speak. She did not smile. But her tiny fingers closed around the edge of Grace's sleeve, and for the first time in that house, Grace felt the child asking not to be left alone. That evening, rain moved across Chicago in silver lines, tapping against the tall windows and turning the mansion's marble floors the color of wet stone. Most of the staff had gone quiet after dinner, disappearing into laundry rooms, pantries, and back corridors where the rich did not have to see the work that kept their world shining. Grace was folding linen napkins in the service hall when she heard the softest sound from the laundry room. Not crying. Not speaking. Just the faint rustle of fabric, repeated again and again, like someone trying to smooth out a memory that would not lie flat. She pushed the door open with her elbow and found Lily sitting between two rolling baskets of clean sheets. The child was barefoot, her knees pulled to her chest, a pale silk scarf wrapped around both hands. Grace recognized it from the framed photographs in the east hallway. Mrs. Moretti had worn that scarf in nearly every picture, tied around her neck, tucked into her hair, draped across her shoulders during summers by Lake Michigan. Lily held it now as if it were the last warm thing left in the house. Her small thumb moved over one corner of the fabric again and again, rubbing the same place until her skin turned pink. Grace stepped inside, then stopped 6 feet away. She remembered Mrs. Alvarez's warning. She remembered the security cameras. She remembered that she was new, replaceable, and one mistake away from losing the paycheck that kept her mother's medicine covered. But Lily did not look like a rule. She looked like a child hiding from a room full of adults who had forgotten how to kneel down. Grace slowly lowered herself to the floor, careful not to crowd her. "I used to hide in laundry rooms too," she said softly. "They smell like soap, and nobody expects important things to happen next to towels." Lily did not answer. Her eyes stayed on the scarf. Grace reached into the basket beside her and folded a hand towel into a small square, then another, letting the quiet do most of the work. After a while, she placed a cup of warm milk on the floor halfway between them. "No sugar. Just a little cinnamon," she said. "My grandmother said cinnamon made lonely nights feel less empty." Lily's gaze flicked to the cup, then back to the scarf. Grace did not push it closer. She did not ask why the child was there. She did not say everything would be okay, because children knew when adults were lying. Instead, she leaned her back against the dryer and whispered, "People do not have to speak to be heard. Sometimes they just need somebody patient enough to listen to the quiet." Something changed in Lily's face. It was small, barely more than a breath, but Grace saw it. The child's fingers stopped moving. Her eyes lifted, cautious and searching, as if she had heard a language no one else in that mansion knew. Then, with trembling care, Lily slid the scarf across the floor toward Grace, not giving it away, just sharing its weight for one moment. Grace placed one hand beside it, not touching until Lily nodded. The silk was cool beneath her fingers, and tucked into the hem was a tiny brown stain shaped like a teardrop. Lily watched Grace notice it. Then she raised one finger to her lips, not as a child asking for quiet, but as a child warning her that some secrets in this house were never meant to be spoken. The next morning, the laundry room felt colder than it should have, as if the secret Lily had shared without words had stayed behind in the folds of the sheets. Grace moved through her duties with the scarf hidden carefully in her mind, not in her hands. She had folded it and left it where Lily could find it, because some things did not belong to the help, and some grief should never be stolen from a child. But the tiny stain in the hem followed her all morning. So did the way Lily had lifted one finger to her lips, not with fear of being loud, but with fear of being heard by the wrong person. Near noon, Grace found Lily in the sunroom, sitting beneath a wall of glass that overlooked the frozen garden. The child had arranged wooden blocks into a narrow staircase, one block after another, rising toward a small toy horse at the top. She was not playing. Her hands were too careful for that. She placed a small wooden woman at the bottom step, then moved another figure behind her, a taller one with yellow painted hair. Grace felt the air leave her chest. She knelt a few feet away, keeping her voice gentle. "That looks important," she said. Lily did not look up. Her fingers hovered over the yellow-haired figure. Then pushed it behind the wooden woman. Before Grace could understand more, Claire's voice cut through the room, sweet and sharp at the same time. "What exactly are you doing with her?" Grace stood immediately. Claire Whitmore was framed in the doorway, dressed in a pale blue dress, her silver bracelet bright against her wrist. Behind her stood Mrs. Alvarez with a stack of towels, two maids from the kitchen, and one of Vincent's security men. Claire had chosen her audience well. Grace lowered her eyes, not from shame, but from discipline. Lily was sitting alone. "I was only making sure she was all right." Claire smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "How touching. 1 week in this house, and suddenly you think you understand my future stepdaughter better than her own family." Lily's hand closed around the toy woman. Grace heard the wood creak under her small fingers. "I did not mean any disrespect, Miss Whitmore." "No," Claire said, stepping closer. "People like you rarely mean disrespect. You simply forget your place when kindness is mistaken for importance." The room went still. Mrs. Alvarez looked down. The other maids pretended to study the floor. Grace felt the words land, but she kept her face calm. She had been spoken to that way in hotel lobbies, in private kitchens, in homes where people smiled at charity events and treated workers like shadows. But Lily was watching, and Grace would not teach a child that humiliation had to be swallowed to survive. Claire bent slightly toward Lily, changing her voice into something soft enough for witnesses. "Sweetheart, did Grace bother you?" Lily stared at the blocks. Claire placed a hand near the child's shoulder. Lily went rigid. Grace saw it. Claire saw Grace see it. That was when Claire straightened and let her mask slip just enough. "You are not family, Grace. You are hired help." Grace lifted her chin slowly. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "I am hired to help." Before Claire could answer, Lily suddenly swept her small arm across the blocks. The wooden staircase scattered across the marble floor with a sound that made everyone flinch. It was not a tantrum. It was a message. The yellow-haired figure rolled to Claire's shoe and stopped. There, face down. For the first time, Claire looked uneasy. Grace did not move. Lily did not speak. But every person in that sunroom felt the quiet change shape. By midnight, the mansion had returned to its polished quiet, but the sunroom scene had not left anyone untouched. Grace could feel it in the way the kitchen staff avoided her eyes, in the way Mrs. Alvarez pressed a cup of tea into her hands without speaking, and in the way Claire passed through the back corridor with her smile fixed too carefully in place. Vincent did not come home until after 11. Grace heard the front doors open, heard the low voices of his men, heard his measured footsteps cross the marble foyer and stop near the staircase. For a moment, the whole house seemed to hold its breath around him. Then a sound came from above, sharp enough to cut through every wall. Not a scream exactly, but a broken cry from a child who had been dragged out of sleep by something her heart still remembered. Grace was already moving before anyone called her name. Mrs. Alvarez appeared from the pantry in her robe. 2 guards stepped into the hall. Claire came down from the second-floor landing in a silk robe, her hair perfect, her face pale with irritation more than worry. Vincent reached Lily's room first. Grace stopped at the doorway because it was not her place to enter, but she saw enough. Lily was under the bed, pressed into the corner where the shadows were deepest, clutching her stuffed rabbit so tightly its seams had started to pull. A lamp had tipped on its side. A book lay open on the rug. Vincent knelt near the bed, his voice low and careful, the voice of a man who could command a city but not coax his own daughter out of the dark. "Lily, sweetheart, it is Daddy. Come here." Lily only shook harder. Claire stepped into the room with a tired sigh. "This cannot keep happening, Vincent. She needs another doctor. Maybe something to help her rest." The words were wrapped in concern, but Grace saw Lily's feet curl inward at the sound of Claire's voice. Vincent turned sharply, his patience thinning. "Enough." Grace did not know she had spoken until everyone looked at her. The word had left her quietly, but it had landed. Claire's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" Grace swallowed, but she did not step back. "Please, sir. The lights are too bright. Too many voices are crowding her. If you let me try, I can help her calm down." Vincent's face hardened. "You think you can do what her doctors could not?" "No," Grace said softly. "I think I can stop doing what scares her." The silence after that was dangerous in a different way. Then Lily made the smallest movement. Her hand slid from beneath the bed, reaching not toward Vincent, not toward Claire, but toward the doorway where Grace stood. Vincent saw it. His expression changed so quickly it almost looked like pain. He moved aside. Grace entered slowly and sat on the floor 6 feet from the bed, palms open on her knees. She did not touch Lily. She did not tell her to come out. She only began humming the same old song from the laundry room, low and steady, barely louder than the rain against the windows. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Claire crossed her arms, impatient. Vincent stayed perfectly still. At last, Lily crawled out from under the bed, cheeks wet, hair tangled, rabbit held to her chest. She passed her father by with trembling steps and sat beside Grace, close enough for her shoulder to touch Grace's sleeve. Vincent looked at his daughter choosing safety in the presence of a maid, and something inside him folded under the weight of it. Claire looked away first. Grace kept humming until Lily's breathing slowed. In that dim room, under the soft yellow lamp, the most powerful man in Chicago finally understood that his daughter had not been unreachable. She had simply been waiting for someone who did not frighten her. The next day, Vincent sent every specialist away before breakfast. Their folders, clipboards, and careful voices had filled the house for months, but none of them had seen what Grace had seen in 5 minutes on a bedroom floor. Claire called it reckless. Mrs. Alvarez called it unusual. Vincent called it necessary, and in the Moretti mansion, that ended the conversation. Grace was summoned to the small library near the East Garden, a room Lily had not entered since her mother's passing because it still smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Vincent stood by the window, broad shoulders outlined against the pale morning light, his coffee untouched on the table beside him. Lily sat on the rug with her stuffed rabbit in her lap, watching Grace as if the answer to some private prayer had walked through the door. Vincent did not soften his voice when he spoke, but something in it had changed. "Tell me what you need." Grace looked at him carefully. "Not money. Not permission to play doctor. Just time. Quiet. Choices she can control." Vincent glanced at Lily, then back to Grace. "Explain." Grace opened the canvas tote she had brought from the staff room and took out 3 sheets of construction paper, blue, yellow, and red. She placed them on the rug with slow, deliberate care. "Blue means safe," she said. "Yellow means scared. Red means danger. No one has to talk before they are ready. Sometimes pointing is enough." Lily stared at the colors. Claire, who had insisted on being present, stood near the door with her arms folded, the silver bracelet resting bright against her wrist. "That seems childish," she said. "She is a child," Grace answered quietly. The words were not loud, but Vincent looked at her. Claire's smile thinned. Grace placed a small wooden button on Lily's palm. "You can put this on any color you want. There is no wrong answer." Lily turned the button over with her thumb. The room waited. Outside, a gardener moved past the window, trimming winter branches with slow, careful snips. Inside, the silence deepened until it felt like everyone was standing at the edge of a secret. Lily leaned forward and placed the button on blue. Vincent released a breath he had been holding. Grace nodded once, calm and gentle. "Good. This room feels safe." Lily's eyes flicked toward Grace, and for the first time, the child almost smiled. Then Claire stepped closer. "What about me, sweetheart?" She asked it sweetly, with Vincent watching. Lily's fingers curled into her dress. Grace did not speak. Vincent did not move. Claire lowered herself into a chair, polished and patient for the audience she cared about most. Lily looked at her, then down at the papers. Slowly, the button slid from blue to yellow. Claire laughed softly, but the sound had no comfort in it. "She is nervous because everyone is staring." Grace kept her eyes on Lily. "Do you want us to look away?" Lily nodded once. Vincent turned his face to the window. Grace lowered her gaze to her hands. Even Claire hesitated before looking toward the bookshelves. When the room stopped watching her, Lily moved the button again. This time, it landed on red. Vincent saw it from the corner of his eye, and the color drained from his face. Claire stood too quickly. "This is ridiculous." But Lily was not finished. Her small hand reached for the basket of crayons Grace had set beside the papers. She chose gray first, then brown, then a silver crayon worn down almost to the paper label. On a blank sheet, she drew the grand staircase, each step carefully marked. At the top, she made a circle around something small and bright on a woman's wrist. Grace felt her heartbeat slow in a way that frightened her. Vincent turned fully now, his eyes locked on the drawing. Claire's bracelet caught the sunlight and flashed across the wall. Lily pressed the silver crayon harder until the tip broke. No one spoke. No one needed to. The child had found her language, and the house had just heard its first warning. Vincent did not question Grace in front of Claire. That was the first sign that something inside him had changed. He picked up Lily's drawing, studied the crooked staircase, the gray shadows, the silver circle pressed so hard into the paper that it had torn near the edge, and then folded it once with careful hands. Claire laughed again, lighter this time, trying to smooth the room back into something she could control. "Children draw strange things after nightmares," she said. "We should not turn crayons into accusations." Vincent looked at her for a long moment. His face gave nothing away, but his silence made the air colder. Grace felt Lily shift closer to her knee. It was not enough for anyone else to notice, but Vincent noticed now. He noticed everything. After Claire left the library, her heels clicking too sharply down the hall, Vincent ordered Lily taken to the garden room with Mrs. Alvarez. Grace started to follow, but his voice stopped her. Stay. The door closed, leaving them alone with dust floating in the pale sunlight and the faint smell of lavender from books no one had opened in months. Vincent placed the drawing on the desk between them. Tell me what you think this means. Grace kept her hands folded in front of her apron. I think Lily is trying to show you something she cannot say yet. His jaw tightened. About Claire. Grace did not answer too quickly. She knew powerful men often asked for truth and punished people for giving it. I think Miss Lily feels unsafe around her. Vincent's eyes sharpened. Feeling unsafe is not proof. No, sir, Grace said. But it is a place to start listening. For the first time, anger broke through his control, not loud, not wild, but cold enough to make the room feel smaller. You have been here 1 week, Miss Walker. Claire has been part of this family for almost a year. Do not confuse a child's fear with a crime. Grace lowered her gaze, but not her dignity. I am not confusing anything. I am only telling you what your daughter is showing us. Vincent turned away as if the words had struck a place he did not want touched. Through the window, Lily stood in the garden room with Mrs. Alvarez, small hands pressed to the glass, watching him. The sight softened him and wounded him at the same time. That night, after the mansion had gone still, Vincent climbed the stairs without guards, without phone calls, without the armor of command. He stopped outside Lily's room and found the door slightly open. Her bed was empty. For one terrible second, he could not breathe. Then he saw the pale edge of her blanket under the bed. He lowered himself to the floor, a man worth millions kneeling on a child's rug, and found his daughter curled in the shadows with her stuffed rabbit and a framed photograph clutched against her chest. It was a picture of her mother, Elena Moretti, smiling beside Lake Michigan, her scarf caught in the wind. Lily was asleep, but her cheeks were wet. Vincent gently slid the photograph from her arms, careful not to wake her. The back of the frame had loosened. Something white peeked out from beneath the cardboard backing. He pulled it free and found a torn piece of paper covered in Lily's uneven handwriting. 3 words sat there, shaky but clear enough to stop his heart. Mommy did not fall. Vincent sat on the floor until the hallway lights dimmed around him. In all his years of reading enemies, contracts, lies, and faces, he had missed the only message that mattered. His daughter had been speaking all along. The house had simply refused to hear her. Morning came pale and cold over the Moretti estate, but Vincent had not slept. He sat in his private study before sunrise with Lily's drawing on one side of his desk and the torn note from behind the photograph on the other. The words were small, uneven, and devastating in their simplicity. Mommy did not fall. He read them until they stopped looking like handwriting and started looking like judgment. By 7:30, he walked into breakfast with the same calm face the city feared, but Grace saw the difference immediately. His silence had weight now. It was no longer the silence of a man avoiding pain. It was the silence of a father gathering every broken piece of truth before anyone could hide it again. Lily was already at the table, sitting stiffly with her rabbit tucked beside her. Claire entered last, bright as morning glass, wearing a soft white blouse and the silver bracelet Grace had seen in the drawing. She kissed Vincent on the cheek, then glanced at Lily with a smile that made the child lower her eyes. Breakfast had barely begun when Claire lifted her wrist and froze. "Oh," she said softly, touching the bracelet. "One of the small charms is missing." Mrs. Alvarez looked up from the sideboard. Vincent set down his coffee. Claire turned her hand slowly, making sure everyone could see the empty clasp. "It was here last night. I remember because I wore it in the library." Her eyes moved to Grace. The room understood before she said another word. Grace stood near the wall with the water pitcher in her hands, her face calm though something cold moved through her stomach. Claire gave a wounded little laugh, the kind meant to sound reluctant. I hate to even suggest this, Vincent, but certain people have had unusual access to the family rooms lately. Mrs. Alvarez stiffened. Lily's fingers tightened around her spoon. Vincent looked at Grace, then at Claire. Are you accusing my employee of theft? Claire's expression softened into disappointment. I am saying we should be careful. She is new. She has been alone with Lily. She has been in private rooms. And honestly, after yesterday, I am worried she has confused kindness with permission. Grace felt every eye in the breakfast room turn toward her. The old humiliation rose like heat in her throat, familiar and bitter. She had known women like Claire before, women who never raised their voices because they had learned how to make accusations sound like concern. Vincent leaned back slightly. Miss Walker, do you have anything to say? Grace looked at him, then at Lily. The child was shaking so faintly that only someone watching with love would notice. Grace placed the water pitcher on the sideboard, folded her hands, and spoke carefully. Ask Lily. Claire blinked. Excuse me? Grace did not look away. Ask Lily where the charm is. The silence changed. Vincent turned to his daughter. Lily's face went white. Claire stood too quickly, her chair scraping softly across the floor. This is cruel, she said. You know she cannot answer. Grace lowered herself to one knee several feet from Lily, not touching, not crowding, only making herself small enough for the child to breathe. You do not have to speak, baby, she said gently. You can point. You can look. You can show us any way you want. Claire's smile disappeared. Lily stared at the table, then slowly reached beneath her napkin. Her tiny hand opened. Resting in her palm was a silver charm shaped like a rose. Claire made a small sound. Vincent did not move. Lily lifted the charm and placed it beside her mother's photograph, which Vincent had quietly set near his plate that morning. Then she pushed it away from Claire and toward Grace. The whole room stopped breathing. Grace understood before anyone else did. Lily had not stolen it. She had taken it because it belonged to the night her mother died. And now, without saying a word, she had given her father the first real piece of evidence his house had tried to bury. Claire reached for the silver rose charm as if taking it back quickly could make the room forget what it had seen, but Vincent's hand closed over it first. He did not grab. He did not raise his voice. He simply placed 2 fingers on the tiny piece of metal and drew it toward himself, and somehow that quiet movement made Claire stop breathing. Where did Lily find this? He asked. Claire looked at the child, then at Grace, then back at Vincent. How would I know? Children pick things up. She has always collected little objects. You know that. Vincent turned the charm under the chandelier light. A faint scratch ran across its polished surface, the same strange mark Grace had noticed in Lily's drawing, the same silver shape circled at the top of the staircase. Lily watched her father hold it, and for a moment the breakfast room seemed too large for one small child to survive. Claire saw the fear and moved toward her with soft steps. Lily, sweetheart, tell your father the truth. Her voice was honey poured over glass. Tell him Grace confused you. Tell him she put these ideas in your head. Grace stayed on one knee, still several feet away. She did not reach for Lily. She did not rescue the child too quickly, because even rescue could feel like another adult taking control. Vincent noticed that too. His daughter was trembling, but Grace was giving her space to choose. Claire was not. Claire bent lower, her smile fixed, her bracelet now missing the rose charm that had completed it. You do not have to be afraid of me, Lily. I am going to be your mother soon. The child's eyes filled with tears, but no sound came out. Claire glanced at Vincent, then made her voice smaller, wounded, perfect for an audience. This maid has frightened her. Can nobody else see that? She has turned a grieving little girl against me. Mrs. Alvarez looked down, but her hands tightened around the coffee tray. Vincent said nothing. His silence gave Lily room, and for the first time, maybe in her whole short life, the adults waited instead of deciding for her. Grace spoke softly, not to defend herself, but to steady the child. You do not have to protect grown-ups anymore. Lily lifted her eyes. Grace held her gaze with a calm so gentle it filled the space Claire had tried to own. Whatever you show us, baby, we will listen. Claire's face changed. It lasted less than a second, but Vincent saw it, the flash of panic behind the polish. She stepped toward Lily again. Come here, sweetheart. Lily pushed back from the table. The chair made a small sound on the marble floor. Everyone froze. She did not go to Vincent. She did not go to Mrs. Alvarez. She walked past Claire, slow and shaking, clutching her stuffed rabbit with one hand and the photograph of her mother with the other. Claire reached out, then stopped when Vincent's eyes cut to her hand. Lily crossed the room and stood behind Grace, pressing her forehead into the sleeve of the maid who had never demanded a word from her. Grace closed her eyes for half a breath, but she still did not touch the child until Lily's small fingers found hers. Vincent looked at them together, his daughter and the woman his household had tried to keep invisible, and the truth settled over him with unbearable clarity. Lily was not afraid of the world. She was afraid of someone in this house. Claire straightened, pale now beneath her careful makeup. This is absurd, she whispered. Vincent placed the silver charm beside Elena's photograph. No, he said quietly. This is the first honest thing that has happened in this room in 8 months. Vincent did not send Claire away that morning. That frightened Grace more than if he had shouted. A loud man could be understood. A quiet one was making decisions no one could see. After breakfast, he placed the silver rose charm into a small velvet box and locked it in the top drawer of his study. Then he ordered the household to continue preparing for the engagement dinner exactly as planned. Claire watched him carefully, waiting for accusation, punishment, some crack in the marble face that had ruled the Moretti name for years. None came. By noon, she had convinced herself that the moment had passed, that Lily was still only a damaged child, that Grace was still only a maid, and that Vincent, like every powerful man she had known, would choose reputation over discomfort. But Vincent was not choosing reputation anymore. He was choosing patience, and patience in that house was colder than anger. Behind closed doors, he called Mrs. Alvarez into the study and asked her for the staff records from the night Elena died. The older woman stood with her hands clasped, her face gray. She had been loyal to the Moretti family for 21 years, through weddings, funerals, whispered business, and storms that never reached the newspapers. But when Vincent placed Lily's drawing on the desk, loyalty began to look too much like silence. Mrs. Alvarez covered her mouth with one trembling hand. I heard voices near the stairs that night, she whispered. I thought it was an argument. Mrs. Moretti was upset. Miss Whitmore was crying. I was told not to speak of it because the family was grieving. Told by whom? Vincent asked. Mrs. Alvarez looked toward the door, as if the walls themselves might answer. Your mother. The words did not land loudly. They landed deeply. Eleanor Moretti had built the family image from polished silver, Sunday church appearances, charity luncheons, and careful lies. She believed scandal was a fire that consumed children first. Perhaps she had thought silence would protect Lily. Perhaps she had thought Vincent could not survive another betrayal. Whatever her reason, she had helped bury a child's truth beneath velvet manners and family pride. Vincent stood alone for a long time after Mrs. Alvarez left. Then he walked to the garden room, where Grace sat with Lily beside a box of crayons. The child had chosen blue that afternoon, but she kept the red paper folded under her rabbit's paw, just in case. Vincent stopped at the doorway, not wanting to frighten her by entering too quickly. Grace looked up. She saw the change in his face and understood that another door had opened somewhere in the mansion, one that could never be closed again. "Tonight," he said quietly, "there will be many people here." Lily's shoulders rose. Vincent knelt, lowering himself until he was not the tallest thing in the room. "Nobody will take you upstairs. Nobody will make you speak. Grace will stay where you can see her." Lily looked at Grace, then back at her father. For a moment, Vincent thought she might run from him again. Instead, she reached into the crayon box, took the blue crayon, and placed it in his hand. The gesture was so small that anyone else might have missed it. Vincent did not. His fingers closed around the crayon as if it weighed more than gold. That evening, the mansion dressed itself for celebration. White roses filled the hall. Candles glowed along the staircase. Guests arrived in black cars, laughing under umbrellas, shaking Vincent's hand, praising Claire's beauty, admiring the family portrait of Elena that still hung near the music room. Claire moved among them like a woman who had already won. She wore ivory, diamonds, and the silver bracelet, now missing one charm. Grace stood near the champagne table in her black uniform, invisible to most of the room and essential to the only person who mattered. Lily sat on the staircase in a white dress, silent, watching, waiting. Across the hall, Vincent gave one quiet instruction to the security man near the study door. "Keep every camera on. Tonight, no one in this family gets to hide behind silence." The engagement dinner began with music soft enough to sound expensive and laughter polished enough to hide discomfort. In the grand hall, men in tailored suits lifted glasses beneath the crystal chandeliers while women in silk dresses praised the white roses climbing the staircase rail. Every surface reflected candlelight, but nothing in that mansion felt warm. Grace stood near the champagne table with a silver tray balanced in both hands, exactly where Vincent had told her to stand, close enough for Lily to see her and far enough for the guests to forget she was there. Lily sat on the third step of the grand staircase in a white dress with tiny pearl buttons, her stuffed rabbit pressed against her side. To most of the room, she looked beautiful, quiet, and sad in the way rich families preferred children to be sad, neatly, silently, without interrupting the celebration. Vincent stood across the hall, accepting congratulations with a calm expression, but his eyes kept returning to his daughter. In his pocket was the blue crayon Lily had given him. In his study, locked away, was the silver rose charm. And in the corner near the music room, Eleanor Moretti watched everything with one hand resting on her pearls, her face composed, her eyes tired from secrets. Claire entered the room last, as if the evening had been waiting for her permission to begin. She wore ivory, diamonds, and the silver bracelet missing its smallest rose, though she had turned the clasp inward to hide the empty space. Her smile never trembled. She greeted guests with graceful touches on the arm, thanked them for coming, and spoke about family as if the word itself belonged to her. When she reached Vincent, she slipped her hand through his arm for the photographers, leaning into the image of a future already arranged. Vincent did not pull away, but he did not lean closer. Grace saw Claire notice. A little before 9, the speeches began. A judge toasted loyalty. A businessman toasted new beginnings. Eleanor raised her glass and said Elena would have wanted peace in the family, and the name landed in the room like a picture frame falling face down. Lily lowered her head. Vincent looked at his mother, and for the first time that night, Eleanor looked away. Then Claire took the center of the room. Her voice was tender, practiced, almost musical. She thanked Vincent for trusting her, thanked Eleanor for welcoming her, and then turned toward the staircase with tears shining perfectly in her eyes. "And most of all," she said, "I want to thank little Lily. I know change is hard, sweetheart, but I promise I will spend the rest of my life helping you feel safe enough to call me Mom." The guests softened. A few women pressed hands to their chests. Grace felt Lily's gaze find her across the room. The child's face had gone pale. Claire climbed the first step, then the second, opening her arms. "Come here, sweetheart. Let us show everyone we are going to be a family." Lily did not move. Vincent took one step forward. Claire kept smiling, but her eyes sharpened. She lowered her voice, still sweet enough for the room. "You look tired. Let me take you upstairs for a minute." Grace heard the tray rattle in her hands before she realized her fingers were shaking. Lily's small body locked in place. Claire reached toward her. That was when Lily stood, not quickly, not bravely, but with the fragile courage of a child who had run out of silence. She stepped down once, then again, moving past Claire's outstretched hand. The room began to quiet. Lily crossed the marble floor in her white dress and stopped beside Grace. Her fingers caught the edge of Grace's apron, exactly as they had before, but this time every guest saw it. Vincent stopped breathing. Claire's smile froze. Lily looked up at Grace first, then at her father, and her voice came out thin, trembling, but clear enough to travel beneath every chandelier in the house. "Do not let her take me upstairs." The music seemed to disappear. A glass paused halfway to someone's lips. Eleanor's hand tightened around her pearls until the strand pulled crooked against her throat. Claire let out a small laugh that died almost immediately. Vincent looked from his daughter to the staircase, then to Grace, then to the woman he had nearly brought into his family. No one moved. No one spoke. For 8 months, the Moretti mansion had treated Lily's silence like emptiness, but in that moment, everyone understood it had been full of truth all along. Claire was the first to try to repair the moment. She gave a soft, breathless laugh and lifted both hands as if the room had misunderstood a child's nightmare. "Lily, sweetheart, you are confused," she said, her voice trembling at the edges now. "You have always been afraid of the stairs since that terrible night." Grace felt Lily's fingers tighten in her apron, but she did not speak for the child. Not anymore. Vincent crossed the hall slowly, each step quiet against the marble. He stopped a few feet from Lily and lowered himself to one knee, the way Grace had taught him without ever saying she was teaching him. His face was pale, but his voice was gentle. "Nobody is taking you anywhere, sweetheart. I am here. Miss Grace is here. You can tell us only what you want to tell us." Lily looked at the crowd, at the white roses, at the staircase glowing beneath candlelight, then at Claire's silver bracelet turned inward on her wrist. Grace saw the child gather every broken piece of courage in her small body. Lily lifted her hand and pointed. Her finger shook, but it did not drop. "She made Mommy fall." The words were not loud. They did not need to be. They moved through the grand hall like winter through an open door. A woman near the fireplace covered her mouth. One of the businessmen lowered his glass. Eleanor Moretti made a sound so small and wounded that it barely seemed human. Claire stepped back, her face empty of color. "That is not true," she whispered. "She is a child. She does not understand." Vincent stood, but he did not look at Claire first. He looked at his mother. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears she had held for 8 months. Vincent's voice was almost calm. "You knew there was more to that night." Eleanor closed her eyes, and the pearls at her throat trembled beneath her hand. "I thought I was protecting you," she said. "I thought if the family survived quietly, Lily would forget." The sentence broke apart before she could finish it, because every person in that room understood the cruelty of asking a child to forget what adults were too afraid to face. Vincent reached into his jacket pocket and placed the silver rose charm on the table beside Elena's portrait. Then he looked at the guard near the study door. "Bring the archived camera files to the authorities. All of them." Claire's polished mask finally cracked. "Vincent, please," she said, reaching for him, but he stepped away with a quietness more final than shouting. "No." Then he removed the engagement ring from his pocket, the ring he had never placed on her hand that night, and set it beside the charm. The sound was tiny, almost nothing, but it ended everything. Claire looked around for an ally and found only faces turned away from her. Mrs. Alvarez moved to Lily's other side, not touching, only standing close enough to be another wall of safety. Grace knelt as Lily turned into her, and this time, when the child reached out, Grace wrapped her arms around her with careful tenderness. Lily began to cry, not silently, not hidden under a bed or behind a locked door, but openly, in the middle of the room that had once swallowed her voice. Vincent lowered himself beside them and placed one hand over his daughter's small back. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I should have heard you sooner." Lily looked at him through tears and reached for his sleeve. It was not forgiveness yet. It was not healing yet. But it was a beginning. Around them, the grand Moretti mansion stood silent, stripped of music, beauty, and lies. For the first time in 8 months, the child was not the broken one in the room. The adults were. And Grace Walker, the maid they had tried to keep invisible, had become the one person brave enough to listen until the truth found its voice.